Welcome to Lesson 7.9 of the Grant Architect course. In this lesson, we explore the choice between internal and external evaluators, a decision with significant implications for evaluation quality, cost, and credibility. Internal evaluators are staff members within your organization who conduct evaluation as part of their responsibilities. External evaluators are independent contractors or organizations hired specifically for evaluation services. Each approach has distinct advantages and limitations. The choice depends on funder requirements, evaluation purposes, organizational capacity, and resource availability. Some situations clearly call for one approach while others allow flexibility. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the trade-offs involved in this choice and how to present your evaluation staffing approach effectively in proposals. Internal evaluation is conducted by your own people. The definition is evaluation conducted by organization staff. Internal evaluators are employees who conduct evaluation as part of their job. Examples include program coordinators who track data, dedicated evaluation staff, or researchers employed by the organization. Internal evaluation takes many forms. Advantages include deep knowledge of the program, lower direct cost, and continuous access to participants and data. Internal evaluators understand context. Disadvantages include potential bias toward positive findings, limited methodological expertise, and competing demands on staff time. These must be addressed. Implementation science emerged from recognition that evidence-based practices often fail to reach those who could benefit. The gap between what we know works and what actually happens in practice motivated systematic study of implementation processes. Implementation science provides frameworks, methods, and strategies for closing this gap. It bridges research and practice by focusing on how interventions are adopted, adapted, and sustained. External evaluation involves hiring independent evaluators outside your organization to conduct all or part of the evaluation. External evaluators bring distinct advantages and face particular limitations. Independence and credibility represent the primary advantage of external evaluation. External evaluators have no stake in particular findings, enhancing credibility of results. This independence matters especially for high-stakes evaluations where objectivity concerns are significant. Specialized expertise may be more accessible through external evaluators than internal staff. External evaluators often bring methodological specialization, experience across multiple similar projects, and dedicated focus on evaluation. Fresh perspective comes from outsiders who see your program without the assumptions that insiders develop. External evaluators may notice issues that internal observers overlook because they are too close to the work. Limitations of external evaluation include higher cost, less program knowledge, potential disconnection from program operations, and the challenge of finding evaluators who understand your context. External evaluators must learn about your program, which takes time and may result in evaluations that miss important nuances. Dissemination refers to active spread of information about interventions to target audiences. Dissemination differs from diffusion, which is passive spread. Effective dissemination considers audience characteristics, communication channels, and message framing. Different audiences may need different dissemination strategies. Dissemination alone rarely produces implementation. Additional strategies are typically needed to support adoption and implementation. Determinant frameworks identify factors that influence implementation success or failure at multiple levels. Individual level determinants include knowledge, skills, attitudes, and self-efficacy of those implementing or receiving interventions. Provider knowledge gaps, resistance to change, or low confidence in new practices can undermine implementation. Organizational level determinants include leadership support, organizational culture, available resources, and competing priorities. Organizations with cultures supporting innovation and learning implement more successfully than those resistant to change. System-level determinants include policies, regulations, funding mechanisms, and interorganizational relationships. Supportive policy environments enable implementation, while misaligned incentives or regulatory barriers impede it. Assessment of determinants should occur before implementation to inform strategy development, during implementation to guide adaptation, and after implementation to explain outcomes. Multiple determinant frameworks exist with different emphases. Select frameworks appropriate to your context and implementation questions. Implementation strategies are the methods used to enhance adoption, implementation, and sustainability of evidence-based practices. Unlike interventions, which are what is implemented, strategies address how to implement effectively. Common implementation strategies include training to build knowledge and skills, facilitation providing ongoing support for implementation, audit and feedback showing performance data compared to standards, reminders prompting desired behaviors at decision points, and academic detailing providing one-on-one education by experts. Strategy selection should match identified barriers. If knowledge is the barrier, training may suffice. If motivation is the barrier, strategies addressing attitudes and incentives are needed. If environmental factors impede implementation, structural changes may be necessary. Multiple strategies are typically needed for complex implementations. Document strategy selection rationale, implementation of strategies, and perceived effects. Hybrid approaches combine internal and external evaluation, potentially capturing advantages of both while managing limitations. Hybrid models provide flexibility to match different evaluation components with appropriate resources. Division by evaluation type assigns internal evaluators to process evaluation and external evaluators to outcome evaluation. This model leverages internal knowledge for implementation assessment while providing independent outcome assessment. Division by phase might use external evaluators for initial design and final analysis while internal staff handle ongoing data collection. This model provides external expertise at critical points while managing costs during implementation. Technical assistance models have external evaluators advise and support internal evaluation rather than conducting evaluation directly. Internal staff build capacity while benefiting from expert guidance. Quality assurance models have external evaluators review and validate internally conducted evaluation rather than replacing it. This provides credibility check while keeping costs manageable. Selecting hybrid approach requires analyzing which evaluation components benefit most from external involvement and which can be effectively handled internally. Match approach to your specific situation. The CFIR Consolidated Framework for Implementation Research organizes implementation determinants into 5 domains. Intervention characteristics include evidence strength, adaptability, and complexity. Outer setting includes patient needs, external policies, and peer pressure. Inner setting includes culture, leadership, and readiness. Individual characteristics include knowledge, beliefs, and self-efficacy. Process includes planning, engaging, executing, and reflecting. Selecting external evaluators when you choose or are required to use external evaluation requires careful consideration of qualifications, fit, and cost. Methodological expertise should match your evaluation needs. If you need sophisticated quantitative analysis, select evaluators with statistical expertise. If you need qualitative depth, select evaluators with qualitative training and experience. Subject matter knowledge of your program area enhances evaluation quality. Evaluators familiar with your field understand context, recognize important nuances, and ask better questions than those learning the area for the first time. Experience with similar projects provides relevant background. Evaluators who have assessed similar programs bring lessons learned and realistic expectations. Ask for examples of comparable evaluation work. Cultural competence matters when working with specific populations. Evaluators should have experience with and sensitivity to the communities your program serves. Communication and collaboration style affect working relationships. Evaluation requires ongoing collaboration between evaluators and program staff. Assess whether potential evaluators communicate well and will work effectively with your team. Cost and availability must be realistic. Qualified evaluators are in demand. Explore availability and costs early in proposal development to ensure your budget and timeline are feasible. Sustainment refers to continued implementation after initial support ends. Many implementations fail to sustain even when initially successful. Factors supporting sustainment include alignment with organizational priorities, integration into existing workflows, ongoing resources, and continued benefit demonstration. Planning for sustainment should begin during initial implementation rather than waiting until support ends. The REAIM framework provides a comprehensive structure for evaluating implementation and impact. REACH asks what proportion of the target population participated and whether participants represent the target population or a biased subset. Effectiveness asks what impact the intervention had on important outcomes, including potential negative effects and effects on quality of life. Adoption asks what proportion of eligible settings and staff adopted the intervention and whether adopters represent the range of possible settings or a select subset. Implementation asks whether the intervention was delivered as intended, what adaptations occurred, and what delivery costs were involved. Maintenance asks whether effects sustained over time at individual and setting levels, and whether the intervention became institutionalized. REAIM dimensions are interrelated such that high effectiveness means little if reach is minimal, and sustained effects matter more than short-term impacts. The framework supports planning for broad, equitable impact rather than optimizing single dimensions. Budgeting for evaluation requires realistic cost estimation, whether using internal or external evaluators. Underfunded evaluation cannot be implemented as planned. External evaluator costs vary widely based on evaluator qualifications, scope of work, and local market rates. Obtain quotes early in proposal development. Expect evaluation to cost 10 to 15% of total project budget for substantial evaluation, though percentages vary. Internal evaluation costs include staff time, which has real cost even if not contracted. Calculate percentage of effort for evaluation activities and ensure adequate staffing. Also budget for data collection supplies, participant incentives, and analysis tools. Data collection costs include survey administration, whether online platforms or paper and printing, interview transcription, travel for site visits, and participant incentives if used. These costs add up and must be budgeted. Analysis and reporting costs include time for data analysis, report writing, and presentation preparation. If using statistical software or qualitative analysis tools, include licenses. External costs apply here even for internal evaluation if specialized analysis is contracted. Dissemination costs include report production, presentation materials, and communication activities. If evaluation findings will be shared broadly, budget for dissemination activities. Fidelity assessment examines whether interventions are delivered as intended. High fidelity means implementation closely matches the original design. Fidelity dimensions include adherence to prescribed components, dose of intervention delivered and received, quality of delivery, and participant responsiveness. Fidelity measurement typically involves observation using structured protocols, review of implementation records, participant reports of what they received, and provider reports of what they delivered. Fidelity standards may be defined in advance based on program specifications or derived empirically from implementation data. Fidelity analysis can examine average fidelity across sites, variation in fidelity, predictors of higher or lower fidelity, and relationships between fidelity and outcomes. Fidelity findings inform both process and outcome evaluation by revealing implementation quality and explaining outcome variation. Internal evaluation has cost too, even if lower than external. Personnel time requires staff time allocated to evaluation. This is real cost even if no additional salary. Budget the time. Training may be needed for building evaluation skills. Staff may need training on methods, instruments, or software. Include training costs. Tools include data collection instruments and software. Survey platforms, qualitative analysis software, and statistical packages cost money. Hidden costs include opportunity costs of staff time. Time spent on evaluation is time not spent on other things. Recognize this cost. Implementation outcomes differ from service outcomes and client outcomes. Implementation outcomes include acceptability, adoption, appropriateness, cost, feasibility, fidelity, penetration, and sustainability. These outcomes indicate implementation success or failure independent of whether the intervention itself is effective. Poor implementation outcomes undermine even effective interventions. Strong implementation outcomes enable intervention effects to manifest. Adaptation and fidelity present ongoing tensions in implementation that require thoughtful balance. Fidelity refers to implementing interventions as originally designed and tested. High fidelity ensures that core components responsible for effectiveness are preserved. Adaptation refers to modifying interventions to fit local contexts, populations, or constraints. Some adaptation is inevitable and potentially beneficial. The challenge is distinguishing core components that must be preserved from peripheral elements that can be modified without compromising effectiveness. Core components are the essential ingredients that produce effects. These should be implemented with fidelity. Adaptable periphery includes elements that can be tailored to context without affecting outcomes. Documentation of adaptations is essential regardless of stance on the fidelity-adaptation balance. What changed from the original design? Why were changes made? What effects did changes have? This documentation supports interpretation and guides future implementation. Presenting evaluation expertise in proposals requires clarity. Qualifications describe who will conduct evaluation and why they are qualified. Name evaluators if known. Describe qualifications. Establish credibility. Role clarity explains what internal and external evaluators will do. If using both, clarify roles. Who does what? How do they work together? Budget justification explains why evaluation costs are appropriate. Reviewers should understand what the evaluation budget buys. Justify the investment. Independence explains how objectivity will be maintained. If using internal evaluation, address bias concerns. If using external, describe their independence. Scaling and spread extend effective interventions beyond initial implementation sites. Scaling up increases intensity or coverage within existing contexts. Scaling out extends to new contexts or populations. Spread involves organic diffusion of practices across settings. Scaling challenges differ from initial implementation challenges. What worked in demonstration sites with extensive support may not work in typical settings with normal resources. Intervention simplification, core component identification, and scalable delivery systems become important. Spread requires attention to communication channels, opinion leaders, and perceived intervention attributes that influence adoption decisions. Innovations that are seen as better than current practice, compatible with values, simple to use, trialable, and observable in results spread more readily. Implementation science provides frameworks for understanding scaling and spread processes. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson. Internal versus external evaluators each have advantages and appropriate uses. Neither is always better. Choose based on your situation. Hybrid approaches combine internal and external strategically. You do not have to choose one or the other. Combinations often work best. Budgeting typically runs 5 to 10% of project budget, matched to design needs. Budget realistically for the evaluation you plan. In our next lesson, we will explore dissemination planning, focusing on strategies for sharing evaluation findings and program knowledge.